Mamorim will look at the fifth Mamer Chelik Beis. The Mamer of Padah Beshalom Nafshi Mikromli Kibirabim Hoyimodi. The Rebbe said this Mamer. It was Monday night, earlier Gimel, before the night going to Tuesday. Tuesday was Yud Kislev, and this was in the year Tafshin Mem Aleph. And later on, this Mamer was published Tes Yud Kislev booklet in Tafshim Mem Ches. And as it says in the beginning of that booklet, this is being printed in honor of the ninth Kislev, of which is the birthday of the Mittel Rebbe in the year Tovkuf Lamed, and also the Yom HaHilula, the yahrzeit of the Mittel Rebbe in the year Tovkuf Peiches, and in honor of the Tes birthday and the yahrzeit of the Mittel Rebbe, and also Yud Kislev in honor, which is the day of redemption of the Mittel Rebbe in the year Tovkuf Pei Zayin. And on the booklet, it is dated Erev Tes Kislev Shnas Hakel Shnas Tovshim Memches. That's when it was printed. The Rebbe makes the note over here when it says that he passed away in Tovkuf Pei Ches. So the Rebbe brings down that there are different places in which it explains the connection to Tes Kislev Tov Kuf Peiches. And also the Rebbe references how it took place in Likutei Levi Yitzchak. The Rebbe brings a reference over there. And then when it talks about the redemption of the Mittel Rebbe, here in Tov Kuf Pei Zayin, so the Rebbe references about the redemption to look in Atomim and Mavid Kuntrus Bad Kodesh, also quoted in the booklet. So the Rebbe gives you different references where to look up about this. Anyways, this is a Mamer Padah Beshalom Nafshi, which is a Mamer that was said many times in association with the redemption of the Mittel Rebbe. As known, he said this pasuk when he was freed from prison. It's the part of Yud Kislev in the Tehillim. Same thing actually by the Alter Rebbe, but over there he was on Tuesday. So the Alter Rebbe said the Tehillim also the way it's divided by the days of the week. So the pasuk of Padah Beshalom Nafshi is included in Yom Shlishi, so it turns out that in Perik Nun Hey Pasuk Yutes, they both said the same pasuk, and that's associated with that. In this Maimer, the Rebbe will discuss the different levels of Padah Beshalom. Really, Shalom was in the days of Shloimeh, and how it's going to be La'asid Lavai, and there's two period La'asid Lavai where the Shalom is, and there is the Shalom that is brought about through Torah in general. There is Shalom especially that comes from Pnimius HaTorah. The Rebbe said, Be'emerson, all the Shaloms are connected with each other, and especially not only Shalom, but even sometimes when you have to do the Padiyah with Derech Milchama, it's also connected, and the Rebbe brings it out to our days in which we have to sometimes struggle, but it's a connection that brings about eventually to the Geula hour and brings to the Padiyah B'Shalom as well, as the Rebbe goes through all the different details. We'll look inside now. H't'shmא, early in Gimel, Yud Kislev, Tehei Tovshim Mem Aleph. Padah Beshalom Nafshi Mikrovli Kibrabim Hoyu Imodi. So this is the pasuk in Tehillim Perik Nun Hey Pasuk Yutes, in which David HaMelech says that the saying that you have redeemed peacefully my soul. So redemption can be done in a peaceful way or in a way of war. Here he is saying that the Eibishter redeemed my soul peacefully. Mikrovli, those who battle me, Kiberabim Hoyimodi, the many were with me, as this pasuk has been elaborated, explained in many places. But Vair Bal Hageula b'Mamore Dibur Hamaschel Zeh. So the Bal Hageula, the Mittel Rebbe, in his Mamer that opens up with the same words with Padah Beshalom nafshi. Shenitfas b'sifrei Sharei Tshuva. That was printed in his book Sharei Tshuva. That's in Chelik Aleph in Shar HaTfilah over there. The Rebbe brings down the notes, and also the Rebbe brings down in that it's in chapter 11 in the footnote. So over there, what does the Mittler Rebbe explain? The Pirush Padah Beshalom. What does it mean? Redeemed with peace, in a peaceful manner. That Beshalom Davke, he says Davke peace, who Shabediya he be'oifen shahamenagid misbatel legamri, that the redemption is in such a way that the opponent is totally negated, totally nullified. So there is no opposition. So that means Padah Beshalom, without taking out, redeeming without opposition. Shalochein ein tzorich lemilchama klal. That's why you don't need a wage war at all, because there's no opposition. That means Padah Beshalom, in a peaceful way, without opposition. And he says in the Mamer Valderech Shehoya Bimei Shloima. This is similar to the way it was during the days of Shloima HaMelech. Shekol HaGoyim Nizbatlu Legabi Shloima. All the nations, they became nullified relative to Shloima. Shaloya Yidei Milchama, not through war. Shloima did not engage them in battle or anything, but they all became subjugated and nullified in front of Shloima. That's why he is actually called with the name of Shloima. The Shloima, as the Pasuk says, Ki Sholem Hoya B'Yomov, because there was peace in his days, because there was no opposition. They were all bottled L'gabi Shloima. So this, however, as the Mittler Rebbe explains, is not yet the ultimate level of Shalom. The ultimate level of Shalom will be La'asid Lavai. Elo Shahasholem Shebimei Shloimoi Lahoya Adayim B'Shleimus. That Shalom in the days of Shloima was not yet complete. It's not the whole Shalom. But Tachlis HaShleimus Shabazeh, the ultimate wholesome Shleimus, the ultimate complete Shalom Shabazeh, which is in the level of with the nations, that will be in the times of Mashiach. Sha'oz yizbatel hara legamri. Then the evil will be totally nullified. Now there was no opposition. They didn't oppose him. He didn't have to wage war with them. But la'asid lavoi, it's not going to be that there will be no opposition. There will be no opponents. There will be b'chlal no ra. The ra will be totally negated. K'meisha kosov, as the pasuk says, v'esruach ha'tuma avir min haaretz. The spirit of tumah I will remove from the land. Shalochein. Then it says all the nations will flow. They will flow on their own. They'll flow on their own. And further, the Mittler Rebbe brings in that this level of peace and recognition will not only impact humans, the nations of the world, it also will impact all animals as well. And likewise, with regards to the animals, the pasuk says they will not do bad, they will not destroy. Another pasuk says, a lion, just like cattle, will eat straw. So the extension of Sholem that will be And Yemais HaMashiach will be, to the furthest extent, also impacting the animal, the livestock, that they too will be changed around and not have any more negative of destruction and bad, but they will become like tame, like the baka. So the Rebbe wants to make a point now. Why does the Mittler Rebbe bring in the part about the animals that they too? He's trying to say the Padah Beshalom, how it impacts humans, how it impacts the nations of the world, the opponents. Why are we including in this discussion also what's going on with the animals? And the Rebbe says that based upon what we know, that in the times of Mashiach, there will be two periods. One in which the world will just run as it's now, with the exception that the Jewish people will be in the land of Israel and be able to serve Hashem with the Beis Hamikdash, with Mashiach, and not be oppressed or under the dominance of any of the other nations of the world. They'll be determining their own fate. That's the first period. And the second period of Mashiach is when there will come fantastic and miraculous and things that are not in the natural way. But the Mittler Rebbe is hinting and telling us that this ultimate goal of, or the ultimate level of Sholem that will be Mashiach is really in the second period. That in the first period, it's not yet going to be at that highest level. As the Rebbe will explain, that there is three levels. There is peace the way it's by Shloimeh. There is peace the way it's in the first part of Yemais Mashiach. And then there is peace as it's in the second period of Yemais Mashiach. And this all, the Rebbe will explain, corresponds to the different levels of peace that comes through Pnimius, through Nigla the Torah, peace that comes through Pnimius HaTorah, and within Pnimius HaTorah, peace that comes through understanding Pnimius HaTorah, and peace that comes through visualizing the way it will be in the second period, in which you will be able to see as the Rebbe will develop this idea in the Hemshech of the Mamer. So the Rebbe says like this: "V'ula yesh loymar." Perhaps we can say the Mezeh Shemei V'Ba Mamer HaPosuk V'Ariyeh Kabokor Yochal Teven. From the fact that he brings in the Maimer the Posik Aryeh Kaboker Yochal Teven, and so this particular Posik is a very uh, so it's not just that he's bringing about the animals, that, but he brings specifically that verse, that which is a non-natural occurrence. That's the negative of destruction will not be there. But the Maimer also brings down that it will be Ari Kabokor Yechal Teven, which is a fantastic, totally out of nature, is understood. Move on the B'Moisa Mashiach Gufa, so it's understood that in days of Mashiach, Hashleimus the Padah Beshalom Tia B'Tkufa Shniya Davke, that the ultimate in within Mashiach's coming, the ultimate of Padah Beshalom will be in the second period Davke. So because Kemavur B'Mokem Achar, as explained elsewhere, Tivu Chadeis, how to reconcile the opinions, Bepirush V'Gor Ze'ev im Keves V'Goymer. The Pasuk, the prophet prophesizes that the wolf will live together with the sheep. So that means that it will be a total change of nature in the time of Lasid Laviv, when Mashiach will come. So, but it's explained that this would be Shebetkufa Rishayna, so that the two periods, the first period, Mashiach will come, Olam Kimin Hagen, the Mesa Mashiach is Ebederach Moshe Lechida. The Rambam brings down that when the pasuk says this wolf will live with the sheep, doesn't mean literally. it means that it's going to be metaphorically that the nations of the world, which are compared to the wolf, who normally would uh, conquer the sheep, but in the time of Mashiach, the Yidden will be left alone. The Zev is not going to bother them. They'll live together in peace. So the Rambam says this is a mashal v'chida, but there's not going to be any change. That's one opinion. But and therefore, what does it mean? The Zev b'kavan l'umas. So that's take in the first period. We're going to teach it in metaphorically. So in the first period of Mashiach, things are not going to really change from the way of nature, and the wolf will live with the sheep. Means the animals, meaning the goyim, will live in peace with the yidden. But a betkufa shniya yezek pshutei. But in the second period, it'll be literally benegay lebalchayim, as it pertains to the animals, that the wolf will literally live together with the sheep, and that means that it'll be a total change of nature. That nature, as we know it, the animals will have a different nature. So that's in the second period within the Yemesa Mashiach. So the fact that the Mamer brings the posuk of Aryeh Kabakar Yechal Teven, which is a change totally of the ways of nature, the Rebbe learns that the Mittler Rebbe wants to indicate that we're talking here about the second period and when there's going to be an actual change. And this is important to the Mittler Rebbe because when he is talking about the level of peace, ultimately the peace that will be when Mashiach, the ultimate and highest tachlis of peace, will be tak in the second period and not in the first period. That's not yet the ultimate. So there's three levels. There's a level of peace waves by Shleima. There's a level of peace in the first period of Yemesa Mashiach, and then we have a higher level at the second period of Yemesa Mashiach. And the Rebbe will also associate this with the various levels of Limud HaTorah. Base. So to explain this idea, why is the time of Shloima not yet the ultimate peace? What's missing over there, and what's going to be added with Yemesa Mashiach? And to explain the idea, so although the idea of the Beshalom also wasn't days of Shloima, yet Tachlis Hashleimus Shebazeh Yeh B'Meis HaMashiach, the ultimate wholesome peace, when it will be really B'Sholem, that will be in the days of Mashiach. Ubahem Gufan, within the days of Mashiach, it will be B'Tkufa Beisel. I'm explaining this idea. Yuva Mizeshem of Ayir B'Hamaimer will understand it from what the Maimer explains, that the Gam Al Yidei Esek HaTorah, also when we learn Torah, now we don't have to wait for Shloimeh or we have to wait for Mashiach. Even the Torah we learn now also Nasa Padah Beshalom. We say Padah Beshalom. When we learn Torah, that's a means of redemption in a peaceful way. The purpose of Torah and Torah and Tefillah is to sort out and elevate things in the world. So there is the way Torah elevates matters of the world and the way Tefillah elevates matters of the world. The elevation that takes place through Tefillah, that's called B'derech Milchama. You have to wage war because you have to work with your animal soul in order to explain to it and to appreciate godliness. So the sorting out and the working takes by dressing up into the Nefesh HaBahamis and using the logic of the Nefesh HaBahamis to convince it that Torah is good, that is a battle. That's called a Padiyah B'derech Mulchama. That's tefillah. But when we learn Torah over there, it's like by Shlomo. It's the light of Torah uh, impacts that even from a distance, without having to engage, the things that we learn in Torah become elevated to a higher level. So the Rebbe explains, Yuvon mizeh shemaimer, understand if the Mamer Mavayir by Mamer the Gam Ali the Isaac Torah Achshav also to learn Torah now, Nase B'Padah Beshalom becomes the redemption in a peaceful way. Ka'abir Urshal Yidei Isaac HaTorah Hu Bechinas Bittel Hara Be'etzem, because the when we sort out the ourselves and the world around us through our occupation in Torah, is over there we are not only changing the expression of the nefesh habahamis or the negative, but we actually change the essence, the bittul hara be'etzem, the negating of the evil in its essence. We're elevating through living to the level of Torah. Okay, Bekama Drushim has explained in many Maimorim. Hafresh bein Torah litfila. The difference between Torah and davening, shahabirur de tefillah b'derech milchama. The way we sort out and change things around in ourselves, in the world, in our birurim hu b'derech milchama. That's in the way of war. As we say, Shas, Loiso, Shas, Krova, the time of the davening is the time of the war. B'charbi, b'kashti, that's the level of davening. When the davening is time of war, so the birur of tefillah is in a war style, in a way of war. Birur, the Torah, b'derech menucha. But the sorting out of Torah is in a way of menucha, like Padah Beshalom. The achiluk shebein birur b'derech milchama lebirur b'derech menucha. What's the difference between when you're working and sorting out the other side, and you have to wage war? How is that different when you're sorting out in a way of menucha? Is shubebirur shabaderech milchama, that when you're sorting out in a way of war, tzorich hamevarer liislabish b'levusha mizbarer. So the one who is sorting out needs to dress up in the garments of the one that is being mizbarer. Mashen came b'habirur shabaderech menucha, as opposed to when the birur is in a relaxed, in a peaceful way. Hamevarer nishar b'mekoyim. It doesn't have to descend into the mizbarer. It remains in his place. Through the revelation of the light of the mevarer, shemeir ala mizbarer, which shines on the one who's being mizbarer, who's mizbarer memela, then he is mizbarer by himself. The example is as it was in the days of Shlomo. Shlomo sat in his place, and the people came to him. The Shlomo was and remained in his place. And through the greatness of his name, that was heard also in distant places. People heard about the greatness of Shlomo. So on their own, they were attracted. They were drawn to Shlomo. So that means that Shlomo did not need to come down to them, but they heard of Shlomo and they came to him. The pasuk says, "Umalkas shavo shoymas as shema Shlomo goymer v'toy Yerushalma goymer." That when Malkas Shva, the queen of Shva, heard the news of Shlomo, so she came to Yerushalayim. So this difference that we say milchama and menucha, whether you have to engage the one you're mevader or you're just shining the light and it's attracted by itself, is the difference The difference between sorting out when tefillah sorts out and the sorting out and the sorting out of Torah. Birur the tefillah hu be'oifen, the sorting out of davening is in a way shenefesh halikis mislabeshes benefesh habahamis. That when the davening, the birur, what is accomplished is through the godly soul dressing up in the animals. Ukiyadua shebichdei shahais boinenus de tefillah tifel birur nefesh habahamis is known, and in order for the meditation of the davening should impact the sorting out nefesh habahamis, tzricha liyes hahis boinenus binyonim ka'elu. So what do you need to reflect in such matters, and in such a manner, so that the animal soul can grasp? You have to, the fact that the nefesh elikis will connect with Hashem isn't going to impact the nefesh habahamis. You need to engage the nefesh habahamis in its own understandings and in its own appreciation of things. That means that the nefesh elikis has to descend into the nefesh habahamis. As opposed to birur of Torah is in an automatic, is by itself, like King Shlomo, Malchus Shva Kemster, which means they shalem dim b'Torah. Shedover ze muter, v'dover ze osur. Mizbarerim. So then, learning about these matters, not engaging, but learning about it. So then, these items are mizbarerim mimela, that they are sorted out by themselves. So basically, limud Torah is a padah beshalom. The difference between padah beshalom and derech milchama, tefillah is padah b'derech milchama, and Torah is b'derech shalom, because, like by Shlomo, the birurim take place through the learning about them. They become sorted out on their own without needing to engage those matters. But the Rebbe is going to explain now that there's a difference between Nigla the Torah, the revealed part of Torah, although it doesn't engage, but still, in Nigla the Torah, you still have to talk about things. It's a descent to talk about items in the world that need to be sorted out. But it remains Torah, but it's a descent. But when we talk about Pnimiyus HaTorah, over there we don't even have the descent. That's like L'Osid Lavi. And the Rebbe says we don't have a descent, and Bechlal, the limud itself, the Rebbe will explain, is dealing with not things that are questions and answers, but we go straight. And the Rebbe will say, and then within the Ma'aseh Mashiach, there's the two periods in which the different ways of learning Pnimiyus HaTorah through Hasoga and through Riyah. Let's go step by step. Sorting out the Torah accomplishes, there is a difference between the way it's sorted out through the revealed part of Torah to the birur that takes place through the inner part of Torah. The habirur shal yidei limud galia the Torah tzorich liyes halimud binyonim elu shetzrichim levarenom. The subject matter that we learn is those matters that you need to sort out. So what you're learning is not learning about other things. You're learning about the negative things. You're studying about it. But you have to learn about those matters that need to be sorted out. So this is some of the reasons that why did Torah dress up in physical matters, talk about very physical matters. That's the Torah's old idea. The laws of Torah is all in physical matters. And we know the Torah also deals with things that are prohibited, teaches you what's permissible, what's prohibited. That's all part of Torah. The Torah also includes false arguments. What happens if one argues this and one argues that? And we're studying about false arguments. What is the reason that we have to study? Why can't we study just about a holy thing? Is who? Because that's the way, in order to impact, sort out also these things that are usur and the false arguments and the gashmizdike things. How do we elevate them? We have to still go down, even though it's not b'derech hislapshus, but in a way that you actually engage them. But in Torah itself, you still have to deal about these matters in order to be able to impact the birur. So why do we call it then? The fact that also the birur through the revealed part of Torah is called in a way of menucha, even though it has to descend into these gashmizdik and into these different matters, which false arguments and dvarim asurim, whom it's still called b'derech menucha, because you're not really going down to that level. Shagam minyonim elu, because also these items, dvorim ha'asurim, v'gam tainus shel sheker, because also these items, the prohibited matters and the false arguments, k'moshe hem b'Torah, as they appear in Torah, hem Torah. Torah semes, it's true Torah. So it's talking about them, but when we talk about them in Torah, it's not false arguments, it's not negative, it's still Torah. Since also these aspects, these matters of Torah are the word of Hashem, and the word of Hashem, as the pasuk says, my words are like fire. And what does it mean, the comparison to Dvorei Ka'esh? Ma'esh, just like fire doesn't mekabel tuma, the Gemara in Bracha says, af, divrei Torah ein mekabelin tuma. They don't receive tuma. So the fact that we're talking about negative things, the fact that we're talking about dvarim asurim doesn't make these words of Torah is not touched. They remain k'dvorei ka'esh, they remain Torah. So Hareisha Torah he tamid b'makomo madrigoso. So Torah is always in its place and on its level. It's always Dvar Havaya. So it remains at Dvar Havaya. It doesn't descend into the levels what it's talking about. It's just a descent to talk about them. And bir is automatic. That's why it's called Apadiyah Derech Menucha. It's Apadiyah Beshalom. Even Nigla the Torah, notwithstanding that it has to deal with those matters, because within Torah, that's still Torah Semes, it's still Dvorei Ka'esh, it doesn't become Tuma, so it's considered to be a level of impacting from the level of Kedusha, like by Shlomo HaMelech sitting there and impacting the world, all the nations. Elosh Afal became, but still, while it's take also called B'derech Menucha, B'tiyah B'Shalom, this is not, cannot be compared to the birur that takes place through the study of Pnimis HaTorah. The B'habirur Shalidegalia the Torah, because when we're sorting out through the revealed part of the Torah, so the fact alone that the Torah speaks about physical matters, so this is already a sort of a, so to speak, it's a descent to have to talk about it. Ella, the only thing is, still after its descent and its brought down Lamaito, is Torah Dvaravaya. It's not that it descends and dresses up something else, it's still Dvaravaya. As opposed to the bitter that takes place through the inner part of Torah. That's on a whole higher level. Pnimis HaTorah is called the Ilona the Chai, the Eitz HaChaim. Eitz HaChaim, there's no Toivara. Eitz HaDas is Toivara. That's nigla the Torah. But pnimis ha-Torah is Yilom Dechaya she'ena melubeshes b'toivara. It doesn't dress up in Torah. It only talks about godliness. So the bitter from Torah is not a bitter through descent. Harabiru shenase al yidei zeh hu shaloi b'derech hislapshus klal. So then the bitter that takes place through pnimis ha-Torah is not in a way of islapshus at all. So we have a chiluk in Padah Beshalom through nigla the Torah, and we have a Padah Beshalom which is through pnimis ha-Torah. And nigla the Torah, while it's not mamashi slapshus, but it's still a yerida to go down to talk about those levels, and that inevitably is a yerida. But still, it impacts it. It remains Torah semis. It remains Torah. It remains kedvar kaish. But still, in Pnimis HaTorah, it's much more because over there it comes from Ilana Dechaya, and there's no mixture of anything else. The Rebbe will explain that actually it's not only in the Birurim that take place, that this is B'derech Menucha, more, the Pnimis HaTorah is more B'derech Menucha, more B'Sholem than Nigla Torah, but also the whole style of learning, there's a difference. That Pnimis HaTorah, there's no questions, there's no answer. And Nigla the Torah through questions and answer, and that's the reason the Rebbe also says why there's a difference in the bitter, as the Rebbe continues to explain in Ois Dalet. And then later on, the Rebbe will explain there's two levels in Pnimis HaTorah, also corresponding to the two times of Yemei Mashiach. Ois Dalet. Ula yesh lo isi. The Rebbe says perhaps we can add machiluk sheben galia the Torah lipnimis haTorah, in the difference between the revealed part of Torah and the inner part of Torah. Not only that there is a change in the way it's mevarer, but there's actually a change. In the study itself, that the true idea of menucha, of relax and peace, is dafke in pnimis hatoyre, hu loy rak beinyan habirurim shadei limud hatoyre. It is not just in the aspect of the sorting out that takes place through limud hatoyre, but also in the study of Torah itself. The halimud benigla the Torah ba'ofen the kushas v'terutzim. The way the study is in the revealed part of Torah, it's in a way of questions and answers. Shebetchila kosal kadaitoch shasvar hikach v'kach. In the beginning, the thought is maybe this is the idea. And then when you reach to a deeper understanding, and then you negate, you reject the previous svara. So you had an idea, then you had a question, and then you come up that the previous idea was wrong. You negate it. Sometimes the Gemara will even go as far as saying that the previous idea was bedusi, was a made up. It's totally unfounded. So you have the change in Torah that negates it and says that is similar to negating the enemy, which is similar to what we say, Dam L'Reif Shafachta, which we can't give to David HaMelech, the building of the Beis HaMikdash, only to Shlomo, because it was through battles, through blood. The way you came to the conclusion in Nigla the Torah was by negating and pushing away the previous svara, the shlila svara hakaidemes, the idea of negating the previous idea, hu inyan dam l'reiv shafachta. That is, you have poured lots of blood, shenemar gabe David, which was said by David, k'moshu ba'olam ha'seichel, as it's in the world of intellect. In the intellect world, when you negate and you kill a svara, that's called dam l'reiv shafachta in the world of seichel. Just like in the physical world, you get rid of the opponent. Over here, you get rid of the opponent's svara. The real idea of peace is specifically in Pnimis HaTorah, the inner parts of Torah. Because the inner part of Torah delays tamon leikushyav lemachloikis. Over here, there's no question, there's no disagreements. So forget about not talking about the birurim. The study itself is a peaceful study. And this is actually the reason why the birurim are done in such a way, in a peaceful way. Yesh loymar, the chiluk zeh sheben kalya de Torah lepnimis ha-Torah, shebayfen alimud gufa, that this distinction between the revealed part of Torah, the inner part of Torah, which is in the style, in the way we learn, that's the reason that there is a difference between the way the bitter comes through nigla and the way it comes through chassidut. The whole poyel b'dugmose, because every worker works similar. So if that's the Pnimis HaTorah, it's a Pnimis Dikador. It works that way also to impact. So it's going to be poil in the world in a way of menucha. L'chein davke Pnimis HaTorah shebo atzmo leis tamon leikushav lemachloikis. Davke Pnimis HaTorah, in which in and of itself there is no question, no argument. Gam habiru shal yoda hu b'derech shal menucha. Also the sorting out that takes place from the Pnimis HaTorah is in a peaceful and a relaxed way. Because the study of Pnimis HaTorah in essence is a peaceful study. No questions and no machlokes. Now the Rebbe is going to talk at Pnimis HaTorah Gufa. There is two ways. There is the way that it is understood, and then there's a way, higher way with Mashiach, it's seen. The idea is, hey, also the inner part of Torah itself. Generally, there's two ways within Pnimis HaTorah. As it's been dressed up in the understanding and the grasp of the seichel. The b'china zu shebepnimis HaTorah yeshno gam achshav. That level of Pnimis HaTorah, even now before Mashiach comes, we have the idea that we can understand. But then we have the second level as seeing Torah. Higher than understanding and grasping. That level is going to be in the future to come. As it's known, Mashiach will teach the inner part of Torah to all Yidden in a way that they'll see. The difference that exists between seeing and grasping, that is, we can understand now, but the grasping that will be the Bahasoga Gamkshi behis asmus, because when you grasp something, even if you are true, it become verified and very true by you. So it's still possible that through a question there will be a change or a weakening of the idea, even though you understand it and you know it, you're convinced. But as opposed to when you see something, the Torah that you learn through seeing, it's not refutable. Even when they'll ask you some of the most strongest questions, he's not going to have any doubt in what he saw. So, because you saw it, what's the reason why an idea one can weaken by a question and what you've seen they can't weaken? The reason is when a person grasps something with his mind, that's an additional piece of information that is not the person, it's not engraved in the person. When you see, then the person himself says this. That's additional matter over the person than what he understood. As opposed to when you see something, you're seeing it's engraved in your inside. As if it becomes part of your essence. That's why you can't have a change over there. So there's a difference between the levels of Pnimius HaTorah, learning it intellectually, which is something added to you, or seeing it as will be in the time of Mashiach. And the Rebbe will also explain the difference of the Padah Beshalom that was in the days of Shlomo, and then the first level of Mashiach and the second level of Mashiach, as the Rebbe continues to explain.